again, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for another Tuesday Tips. My name is Chantel. I am with Crazy Mom Crafts a Lot. And as you can tell, the technology is making me crazy, but I help teach card making and paper crafting. Today's Tuesday Tips technique, we are going to focus on embossing with the heat tool and embossing powder. And we're also going to learn about stamping on the diagonal. These techniques we're going to be using in the upcoming free mystery stamping event that I hold every Friday on the Crazy Mom Crafts a Lot Facebook group and page on Facebook. You can also catch the replay on YouTube. If you need the supply list, which is clue number 1, hop on over to my website and click on Let's Connect and Newsletter. There you can request the newsletter where I send out the supply list for the free mystery stamping event. Again, it's every Friday at 2 p.m. Arizona time. And there is a world time converter that you can go to see what time that would be for you locally. So let's get to it. So what I have here is I have my Stamp and Emboss white embossing powder. This is an older one. I have a Versamark ink pad. I have a piece of 3 3/4 by 5-inch cardstock, just to be used for a card front to add to the front of a card later. I have a stamp already mounted to my clear block, and I'm using a C block. The stamp set I'm using is the Zany Brainy, or the Zany Zebras rather, and I'm using the Wild About You. And then I'm also going to be using an embossing buddy, and this is to remove the static off the paper so that the embossing powder sticks nicely. So I'm going to run that over my cardstock first. We also will be using a heat tool, but we'll get into that here in a little bit more, a little bit later. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my cardstock so it's on a diagonal. And I'm going to ink up using my Versamark ink, my stamp, and I'm going to start by stamping a little bit off the edge. And we do this because it gives it a little bit more of a random polished look. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp across the cardstock. I am going to move quickly because I am under some pretty bright lights, and I don't want my Versamark ink drying out before I can get embossing powder on it. So I'm just stamping across the diagonal, and this is what I'm referring to when I say that. One last time down here, and we should be good. So I'm going to quickly switch out my embossing buddy for my embossing powder, and I'm using a coffee filter to catch my embossing powder, and this makes it easy to add back into the container when I'm done. I'm going to lightly tap the cardstock to remove the extra and touch up any areas that may need a little bit of touching up. I'm going to take a little paintbrush just to clean up any spots that really the embossing powder isn't, coming off easily. Okay. I'm going to set this carefully to the side, cover up my Versamark pad. And I am going to go ahead and put this all back in to the container, because if I don't, I am notorious for knocking things over. And I see that I actually got some on my little my little paper here, so I'm going to go ahead and tap that back in while I can. Okay, that's cleaned up enough. Get the lid back on. Okay, So now, hopefully you guys can see this relatively well. If you look at the cardstock and where the embossing powder was put, it's not shiny. It kind of has a matte look about it, and it looks sandy still. So you may not be able to see that in the video, but hopefully you'll catch the shine when we get started. I'm going to show you guys how I take the heat tool to my cardstock, but I'm not going to run it right now because it's rather noisy. So when I use my heat tool, this is my Stampin' Up! Heat tool. You can find a new updated version of this on my website in the current annual catalog. I'm using a much older one. When I heat my embossing powder, I like to heat my cardstock from the back. It reduces warping. And I heat it about 1.5 inches to 2 inches away, and I'll move the cardstock along as I go. I also turn my heat tool on and let it warm for about 2 minutes before I actually start embossing, as I found this really speeds up the process and allows for an even heating of the embossing powder. So I'm going to pause the video right now real fast, and I'm going to get that done. Okay, so I'm back now, and I heated using the heat tool the back side of my cardstock, and hopefully you guys can see. I don't know if I can catch a little bit in the light there. Anyhow, it has changed from being what looks sandy and matte to now it's glossy and smooth. And that way you know that the embossing is complete and it's been completed, it's been completely embossed. Otherwise, if you miss areas and then you stick your hand in it later, all the embossing powder will effectively rub away. So you want to make sure that it's nice and shiny and glossy and smooth across everywhere that you stamped and wanted to emboss. So there you guys have it for Tuesday tips. Heat embossing with embossing powder, a heat tool, and stamping on the diagonal. I look forward to seeing your guys' card projects this Friday at our mystery stamping event. Thanks for joining me for Tuesday tips. I'll see you in another video. Bye.